ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Retro Wars, episode 333. Woo. As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I am joined by resident old bastard, Chris Saturn.
Hello.
The words came out of my mouth in the right order.
You know, the weird thing is, for some reason, in my brain, I expected you to call the show Digital Frustrations. And I don't know why.
It has not been that for
many
9 years now. Yeah, it's been a long time.
I don't think it's been 9 years, has it?
It's been
like
50 years. That show died 40 years ago. We do have housekeeping, which is that, surprise, I've been sick again. I've been sick all week. My wife has been sick. My kid has been sick. Oh my God, we have been sick since August.
We just assume you're always sick at this point.
I'm still very snotty and sinusy and stuff. So if pardon if I swear I just listened to one of our episodes and it was me saying this exact same thing not that long ago.
Fortunately, I'm always sinusy, so I just deal with it.
Yeah, if you were a Pokemon, that'd be your Pokemon name, Sinusy.
Yeah. What would I evolve into then?
Sinus infection.
I thought it was going to be Sinosaur.
Sinosaur is a good one. Just a big nose on a dinosaur body.
Perfect. We're off to a brilliant start tonight.
That sounds like a toy that Sid in Toy Story made. My week. Thanksgiving happened. And
true, yeah.
And my daughter's 6th birthday is the same week as Thanksgiving.
Right.
And it's just insane. And I have been playing Shin Megami Tensei 5, nice. Which is very good. I've played very little of it. I'm single digit hours into it. Yeah. Because every game came out at the same time. And it's frustrating to me. But
none of the games that I was looking forward to have come out recently, so I've had much more free time than you have.
I have been buried under games. It's Shin Megami Tensei. It's a very good one. I've been having a good time with it. I'm working my way. I think I'm past the first major boss, and I'm kind of worming my way deeper into the story. And it's fun. If you like Megaten games, it's a good one so far. Yeah. It's honestly kind of it's kind of weird, like seeing Megaten stuff in HD, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess because to me Megaten is a mobile game, or a handheld game, because I played on
one that was handheld.
Yeah, well, it was that one, and then you had Strange Journey, and then you had the remakes and the what was it? There was there was a sequel to 4. They remade Strange Journey on 3DS. I feel like there was more, but yeah, there were just like several Megaten games on DS and 3DS, and so like that's how I've always experienced the games, right?
Yes. Aside from a little bit of 4, I think the last one I played was Nocturne, which was on PS2.
Yeah,
so it was never a handheld exclusive experience to me.
No, I mean, and I doubt it is for most Megaten fans, because but just the weird timeline I happen to get into the game, that's what it is to me. So seeing it like on my big TV, I'm like, oh, this is weird. This feels strange.
Right.
I've also been playing the Halo Infinite. The multiplayer beta started a few weeks earlier than they meant for it to, or I mean, I'm sure they meant for it to, but like, oops,
earlier than previously announced.
Earlier than announced, yeah. And it is it's Halo. It's fun. Right now in the beta, you can't pick which modes you play, which is frustrating. So you just go in and you're like, do you want to play the 4v4 modes or the 12v12 mode with the vehicles and the craziness and everything? And you pick it, and it just throws you in there. It'll be like, all right, now capture the flag, now ball, now Slayer, now whatever. Which is kind of annoying to me because some modes I really don't like. But it's really fun. It's fun Halo multiplayer. They have absolutely completely ripped off the like free-to-play model from games like Apex Legends for this one. Which is to say there are, mountains of cosmetics, and they all cost money. Now, it's an upgrade from Halo 5, which lets you like buy, like in Halo 5, it wanted me to like open a loot box to get a warthog to spawn with it.
Weird.
And that was like untenable. Because it was so bad that I was convinced I misunderstood Halo 5. I was like, obviously these loot boxes, they can't be charging me money to spawn with items in Halo 5. And so I played it for a little bit, and I used up all the items that I had, and I was like, all right, well, let's see. And it's like, we gotta buy a loot box now. And I was like, you have to be kidding me. So I'll take this over that, but really I'd prefer to take neither.
Right.
But given my choices, but it's fun. It's Halo. I've been enjoying it. I've been playing it with friends. I tried a little bit of ranked. I have some people in my life that are very into like competitive FPS games. And I play them, but not like competitively.
Right.
And so I was like, well, he always tells me, he's like, if you play until you get a rank. So the way it works when you go to ranked modes in FPS games, you don't have a rank because they don't know, right? Mm-hmm. And they don't want to start everyone at the same bottom level because some people are probably really good and some are probably really bad. So what you do is you play a certain number of games, and in Halo Infinite, it's 10. You play 10 games, and then it gives you a rank, and then it matches you against people of the same rank.
Right.
So he's always like, you got to get through the ranked battles. Once you have your rank, the game is fun because you're playing against people on your skill level.
Right.
And so I fought my way through 10 ranked matches, got my rank, and I was like, all right, now. It was like that scene in that South Park episode where it's like, now I can play the game. And I went and I immediately queued up for another match, and we got beat worse than I've ever been beaten in Halo in my life.
Nice.
And I was like, what? So I do it again, and the same thing happens. And I was like, what has happened? Either Halo is like, this guy's way better than he's letting on, give him a high rank, or I don't know. So
maybe all the other people that are actually at your skill level dropped out in those first 10 matches.
Maybe.
And so the entry level skill level is actually way above where normal people are.
Yeah. So I went back to, there's a mode called Big Team Battle, and that's the one I like. It's 12v12, and it's like giant maps and vehicles and weapon spawns everywhere. And it's just that right amount of chaos that you don't feel bad about being bad at the game. You know, like there's enough explosions and crazy stuff happening nonstop that you're not really that concerned. You're like, I'm gonna run around and shoot a guy with a rocket launcher and then get in a tank and then drive around. Like it's like the Smash Brothers of Halo, where you're just like, I don't know, I'm just throwing Pokeballs and jumping on people, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. But that's about it for me is Halo and not nearly enough SMT5.
Yeah, I think I mentioned last time that the FF5 Pixel Remaster came out.
I feel like we mentioned it, maybe.
So I'm near the end of it now. Final Fantasy V is one that always takes me a really long time for some reason.
It's a long game.
It is, but there's
very
something
long.
There's something about 5 specifically that any time that I turn the game off, I do not want to turn it back on for some reason. Like while I'm playing it, I enjoy it.
I think I know why. Because for me, when I turn 5 off, I'm immediately thinking about my party and my party configuration, the job system, and the mechanics of the game because they're so good in 5.
Yeah.
And if that's what I'm thinking about, then that means that's probably what you would theoretically be thinking about. And then you would go, never mind, I don't fucking want to think about that stuff.
No, I already maxed out every job.
Okay, well then, yeah, there's nothing to do or think about. Of course you're bored.
And I don't know exactly what it is about 5, because even once you've maxed out all the jobs, it's still a challenging game. It's still pretty rough, and it seems like they didn't tweak this one at all compared to the other Pixel remasters.
Really? Because wasn't 3 like pretty toned down?
Oh, yeah, all of them were. The first 4 were all changed to the point to where the amount of experience you need for the next level was reduced, I want to say, in half from the original games.
Yeah.
So you would gain levels really, really fast. And they didn't seem to do any of that in 5. The level system seems about on par with the original. The job system is absolutely on par with the original. The enemies give the same amount of experience and ability points and everything. So pace-wise, it feels like, at least like the GBA game did.
Yeah.
And so because of that, it's not going anywhere near as fast as the others. But I am in that last stretch. I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but I'm at the point where I am just wrapping up collecting the last of the weapons at the end so that I can finish it up. So I'm enjoying it. I'm getting there. I'm gonna finish. I just got the last of the blue magic, which is one of the stressful things for me whenever I play one of the later Final Fantasy games, is trying to actually not miss one of those spells.
Right.
And so that was nice. So I'm getting there. Also, just so that I could have something simple and lighthearted and easy to play.
More unpacking.
Yeah, so somebody had recommended this game Unpacking that's on
you
Xbox.
talked about it on, I want to say, the last episode, because since then I downloaded it.
Oh, yeah. And
I haven't played it, but
yeah, it's still very simple and basic, but it gets sad. It gets real sad, which is weird for a game with no dialogue and no characters. And yet it still somehow got sad, and it hit me in the feels. But no, it's good. It's very. I like the art style in it, and I like the music in it. It gives it a good tone, and so it's worth checking out.
Yeah. Well, let's do some news. First up, hot coffee found in GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition. For people that don't remember the hot coffee scandal, this was the name for the exploit in San Andreas, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas,
after the actual source, the game code called that minigame Hot Coffee.
In which, if you were able to unlock it with an external cheat device, you could watch characters have uncensored intercourse in the most
awkward,
archaic, stupid-looking, not enticing way.
And they were fully clothed, weren't they?
No. I believe they were nude.
Oh, were they?
Just imagine naked PS2 models, so everything's flat on the bodies because, there's no, like, bump mapping or anything.
I don't know why I thought they were clothed, but it's been a long time since I bothered to look at a video of it. It's probably been
it was just this dumb thing, and it was like, to access it, you had to, like, basically connect a PC up to your PS2 or emulate the game or something. It was inaccessible.
Play the PC version. It was in.
Well, you still had to mod it.
You had to install a mod, but it was real easy to do on the PC.
Right, but at this point, if you're going on the internet downloading a mod, you could just go download pornography.
Correct. Yeah.
How is it in? All right, I'm getting back into the hot coffee thing.
Well, you didn't even have to download a mod. You just had to. Well, I guess technically you're having to modify some of the system or the game's files, but all of the data was still in there. You just had to turn the flag back on.
So if you were able to modify your game, you could watch characters in the game have sex. So they pulled it off of shelves, they fixed it, and they put it back out. That version is the one that they put out, the original version. It was pulled from the Rockstar launcher until this, and the music issue is patched out.
Right.
Patches are, quote, on the way for all versions, and they're really super duper sorry about this terrible piece of shit collection they squeezed out onto the internet.
And they also made a statement about how this isn't how they like to release games.
They could have fooled me.
This isn't the reputation they want.
What I want to know is who forced them to do it.
Right? And
like, they're talking about this like they're like, well, we had to release it, so what did you want from us? And we're like, why did you have to release it? Why didn't you just fucking make it better?
And they didn't announce it until like a month and a half ago, if that?
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
So they could have just held off on announcing it. It's not like it was absolutely vital that it be released this calendar year.
Yeah. Halo getting a TV adaptation on Paramount Plus. I'm mildly interested in that. I'm mildly interested in the Halo lore and universe in general.
Isn't Master Chief a silent protagonist?
No, he talks.
Oh, okay, never mind.
He talks. Yeah. In the earlier games, he doesn't talk a lot. But then he talks a lot in the later games. But he also becomes less and less. Well, I don't want to spoil anything about the Halo games because you should play them. They're fantastic. But he becomes less and less of the main character as time goes on and the games you're depending on the games you're playing. So it's I don't know. I'm interested. I like Halo. Halo's fun. It's cool. It's
I'm just hoping that they record it in such a way that it constantly accidentally triggers the voice assistant in Windows 10.
You can't trigger something that barely functions. You'd have to work it all for that to happen. Microsoft announces the end of the backwards compatibility program on Xbox One, X, and S. Okay. They announced the end of the backwards compatibility program on Xbox One and Series X and S.
Correct.
And the addition of 76 new backwards compatible titles.
Right.
They say any further titles are blocked by either technical or legal hurdles. Phil Spencer believes the future of game preservation is via legal emulation, and Reggie Fils-Aimé admits in an interview at Xbox's 20th anniversary event that he owned an Xbox and PS2 and didn't buy a GameCube until after working for Nintendo. I knew it. You fucking fraud.
If you look at that guy, you were like, that's an Xbox player. That guy. He played some Halo. No,
I don't know. It's honestly weird to me that people think that just because you work for a company means you've been a champion of their products for years. I mean, I'm sure Reggie loved Nintendo and loved his time at Nintendo, but it was a job, dude. You know what I mean?
In that same conversation, they had Peter Moore there as well. Formerly of EA and Sega and Microsoft.
Yep.
The guy with the Halo 2 tattoo that's totally a real tattoo. He had brought up some bad blood from the Dreamcast era in that interview, and was trying to give Reggie hell about it, and Reggie was like, I didn't work at Nintendo then. and then also he said that, well, the Xbox is clearly the successor of the Dreamcast legacy, which I think he's said in the past as well, but I don't know.
I think the phrasing was like it passed the torch.
Yeah, something like
to Microsoft. I don't know. The whole Xbox 20th anniversary event, I'm glad they're having their celebratory event, but it all feels so just masturbatory.
Yes.
You know? It's like
there's a lot of fluffing themselves there.
I am sad that they're ending the backward compatibility program, but if they've kind of reached their limit of hey, this is all we can feasibly do without overcoming technical hurdles we're not willing to invest in or legal hurdles that could be expensive, I get it, you know?
Yeah.
But it's still sad.
I am happy to see some of those last games they did add stuff like Gun Valkyrie and the Otogi games and the Max Payne series. Those are all great to have on there. I'm happy about that. I know a lot of people are real sad that Jet Set Radio didn't make it. I never for a second thought that it would. There's way too many people to try to license music from on that.
Yeah. And anything with licensed music, you're going to run into trouble. It just does not work out.
Right.
And a lot of it isn't even because parties aren't willing. It's because sometimes a lot of the time even artists don't know who owns their own music. You know what I mean? It's fucking bullshit.
I always wonder if why do they have to relicense it if you're still having to use an originally purchased disc? Because there are backwards compatible games that require the disc that are not available digitally. If those games were added as disc only, wouldn't that be a already licensed product? I mean, I'm sure lawyers have looked at this and said, no.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure the answer is that they found some way to fuck them either way, so they're just going to be like, I guess you got to pay us millions of dollars for this money, and Microsoft's like, well, we're just going to not do it.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
It's still a little sad, a little bittersweet to see it come to the end, but a lot of games are backwards compatible between the original Xbox and the 360. So they did a pretty good job. Not a great job, but a pretty good job.
Atari is releasing 3 prototype Atari 2600 cartridges on cartridge for $50 each, standard, or $150 for each limited edition.
Yeah, Yar's Return is on there. That's one that I believe was even advertised in the early 80s as coming soon and never released. But it's all games that were actually made back then that just never got a retail release. Getting retail releases now.
$50 feels awful high for an Atari 2600 game.
And
I mean,
all of these games have been, I believe, floating out there as prototypes for years.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure you can already play them on emulators. So it's a little weird that they think they're worth $50 a piece.
It would make more sense to me if they did a 3-game digital collection for $15 or something. Here's these 3 prototype games. That'd be neat. But and finally, Interplay announced a new TV series, Earthworm Jim Beyond the Groovy, because apparently one Earthworm Jim TV series was not enough.
I don't know who the audience was for this. I don't know who was demanding this.
I don't know. Or I feel like Earthworm Jim is one of those things and this is, I know there are Earthworm Jim fans out there, and I don't want to shit on you. But for me, it was always that thing that I didn't care about and no one I knew cared about. But someone somewhere must have cared about it because they kept making them and they had a TV show and it was a deal and they're still making them.
I feel like you might have been a touch too young for it because
maybe
there were a lot of people my age that were big enough fans that they were excited about there being the cartoon back in the day.
Yeah.
So there is definitely an audience for it. I
always put the Earthworm Jim cartoon in the same camp as the Battletoads cartoon. Which is to say, not a great camp.
I would say that the Earthworm Jim cartoon was slightly better quality just because it was done by I think it was done by Warner Brothers.
Right. Well, plus it also had more. I think Battletoads was only like one episode. They had like the one pilot, and they were like, no, never. So yeah, it makes sense. I mean, for Earthworm Jim fans, great. I'm glad that they're still getting a new game and more content. No, I did not.
Oh, it seems like it's taking itself in a self-parody way. It's mocking how it's the character
how dumb
acting,
it is.
Yeah, the character is acting like he was such a big deal and everybody's excited to see him, but then they're kind of like tongue-in-cheek showing that they know that this is all garbage and that only washed-up adults are going to care about it at all. So
okay, well that's good. Yeah. Kind of the Rocko's Modern Life reboot. Kind of thing.
Yeah,
I suppose.
I'm interested to see where they go with it. I don't know if I'm going to go out of my way to watch it. I'm certainly not subscribing to some new service I don't already have for it.
Manufactured cynicism as part of media franchises aimed at 30 and 40 somethings has become kind of a norm.
Yeah.
It hasn't fully played out yet for me, so I still enjoy it, but I suspect 5 years from now I'll be like, oh, a thing that's aware that it's old and dumb. Oh, how original. Like I feel like I'm on that road to getting there, you know what I mean?
That's fair. I absolutely understand.
And we're also on the road to our topic for the week, which is, yeah, that's right. I do segues into the topic now.
Oh,
enjoy
boy.
Just decided right now.
That's good.
We're talking 1994, as in the year 1994 AD. In as far as scope, this is going to be similar to our other year episode we did, which we did 1999, right?
We did 99 previously, yeah. The Prince.
So the same, kind of limitations apply. We may mention stuff about non-US gaming, right, but this is really us talking about gaming in the US in 1994. Mostly because in other countries, it like processing the games industry in a specific time frame in other countries is really hard.
Yeah, and I mean we can see what released when in various regions. We can read about the cultural reception to things, but we don't know what it was like to be in the middle of all of it, to see whatever media blitz there was or was not, or whatever influence or pressure from other peers and people in your age group was. We don't know any of that for any region other than their own, really. So.
And I do want to say if you are in a non-US region, and you want to contribute, some meaningful information that we might be able to look at or process the next time we do one of these year episodes. If you're in our Discord, we have a topic discussion channel, and we post all our topics there. So there's a link in the show description if you want to hop in there. Then whenever we announce a new topic, if there's something like, hey, guys, make sure you check this out, or look at this article, or here's a good breakdown of like 1994 and gaming in the UK or whatever, like we are absolutely open to that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If for no other reason than I'm just personally fascinated by that.
Yeah, it's crazy. So let's talk kind of where we were in 1994 vis-a-vis gaming. So I turned 6 in September of 94. And I can't say I remember much. For some reason, 1995 onward is like, that's the year I remember. It's like the 6 to 7 range forward. Everything before that it's hard to put a timeline on.
That's fair.
I have flashes here and there, but it's mostly like 6 on is where my memory reaches back to. I know we had an NES. And if we had a Super Nintendo, we didn't have more than a very small handful of games for it, because in Christmas 1995, I have that home video and I viewed it.
Yeah.
We were receiving Super Nintendo and NES games for that Christmas, and we're equally excited about both.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I remember that's the Christmas we got Mickey Mouse Capades, we got Mega Man X. I want to say we got like Mario Paint.
Nice.
So if we had a Super Nintendo before that, then we didn't have much in the way of games for it. And I feel like I remember having a Super Nintendo for a long time and just never playing it because it was like we had like Wizard of Oz for Super Nintendo. And I was like, I'm going to go play Ninja Gaiden. So bye. So really NES was kind of the only gaming console in the house. I owned a Game Boy in this era, but the battery compartment had been burned out by leaky batteries.
Right.
So I played only on the AC adapter, and I had Battletoads, I had Mega Man 2 with the label ripped off, and I had Balloon Kid. And that was it. Those were all the Game Boy games I owned.
It's a good game.
And I think we owned a PC, but I mean, I was 6. Like, I didn't even recognize that you could play games. I'd never seen a game on a computer. You know, I remember we had a computer, and I want to say, because Doom was 93, and I'm trying to think of where we had the computer in my house. I want to say I remember seeing Doom on the computer because I remember it scaring me. But I think based on where it was in my house and the remodeling we did, that must have been later than that. But it's possible that I saw Doom on a computer, which, yeah. And that would have also been the first computer we owned in our house ever.
Yeah.
Because we absolutely did not have a machine before that. But I think that might have been later either way. So really, it was NES and specifically 3 Game Boy games. That was all the gaming I was aware of. We did not have magazine subscriptions at the time because they started.
You couldn't.
They went on a TV.
Commercials.
I wasn't allowed to talk to anyone outside my household.
Exactly. You can only churn butter and go to bed. That's it.
And I do remember that this was because I was thinking about that. I was like, man, because you always bring it up. You're like, how are you not aware of this shit? And I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
But I do remember this time in our life was when we were pretty dramatically poor. Like we did not have money. I remember like looking back on it, I can see the identifying marks of a family that is kind of having a hard time getting by.
That's fair.
Like we had food on the table, we had electricity, right. But I didn't have cable TV till 1999. I remember was the year we got satellite. So I didn't have cable TV growing up.
Right.
My kindergarten was tiny. It was only 2 kindergarten classes in the whole school. Oh, wow. And I didn't make friends very easily. We didn't have any magazine subscriptions. Our local video store, rented the NES was their biggest section.
Most of them were even up till this point.
Yeah, and they didn't have like gaming magazines or media of any type that I could like peruse. Right. And so it was just like gaming was for sure in my life, but it was kind of treated similar to other toys. Like, hey, what do you want to do today? Video games or action figures? Like that was.
I see. I read my gaming magazines at the Eckarts at the drugstore. That's where I always got mine.
We had a local drugstore. We did have an Eckerd. Yeah. And sometime we would go in there, but it was very rare. It was a very rare occasion. I remember they had strange and exotic goods. It wasn't like the other drugstore. It was just like those fisherman's cough drops and then an old person. And that was all that was in the building. So yeah, we and then even like groceries, we didn't go to Walmart. We didn't go to like Target or I remember Kmart was.
I don't think Walmart sold groceries at that point.
Oh yeah, I guess they didn't, did they? Yeah. But like Kmart was like a big deal. It was like, holy shit, we're going to Kmart. Kmart has everything.
Yeah, at this point, Kmart had already started selling used NES games, and that was always exciting to me.
And that was, we went to Kmart very rarely because literally at the end of my street was our local library, the school, and the local grocery store.
Yeah.
And so we honestly rarely left our block and only had local television. Nice. So yeah. Yeah, that's where I was gaming. I was playing Mega Man 2 sitting on the kitchen floor next to the only outlet low enough for my AC adapter.
Oh, yeah. We also used the AC adapter, but it was because my parents were too cheap to buy batteries.
Yeah.
But No, I turned 12 in 94. So in the last episode, in the 1999 episode, I believe you had mentioned that you were 12. So
Yeah,
I guess
I would have been. I was born in '88, so I would have turned 11 in 1999.
Okay, all right. So I was comparable to the age that you were in that last episode.
Right.
So we had the Super NES, and we had the Genesis, and this was around the time that I found the used TurboGrafx that we got. All of our stuff we got used. I honestly don't know how we ended up with so many of these things. Like I remember, like having to hunt down sales and used items and stuff, but I don't remember where or how my family actually had the money for it, because just recently I was talking to my dad, and he just casually dropped, "Well, you remember how I was in jail for most of your childhood?" And I was like, "No, I didn't remember that, but cool." So, but somehow we did have these things. We had upgraded our NES to a top loader real late in 93, or maybe it was really early of 94. So it was exciting that now I could play NES games without the struggle of trying to get them to actually load. That was one of the big exciting things for me. Because we did have the 3 or 4 different systems, they would constantly rotate between rooms, between my room, my mom's room, and the living room. So you wouldn't know which console would be in the room when you entered, and you would just get to play whatever was on that one. And we only had a handful of games for most of those consoles. Like I think we had 3 Turbo games and maybe 3 or 4 Genesis games, and not many more on Super NES. If something was in my mom's room, then that was just off limits. There was no chance of me getting to that because she was in the middle of a game and she would not trade. By this point, I was already becoming a fan of. I was pretty solidly a JRPG person by this point, because I'd already played Final Fantasy IV, the first 4 Dragon Quest games, but so few of them came out over here back then. So I was still really heavily focused on fighting games, puzzle games, platformers. That was peak.
Well, plus people forget this, but like kind of every other JRPG also sucked. We have forgotten a lot of JRPGs from this era because they were bad.
Oh, I don't remember them. Don't worry. I can tell you. If you want to know what the bad JRPGs were this era, I remember I rented them or I bought them. Like all of them.
I feel like JRPGs, for whatever reason, is a genre that, like, everyone wants to, like, Bubsy got a reboot, but no one's like, oh, Tecmo's Secret of the 7 Stars.
Yeah. My mom and I, we would just, whenever we were at the used video game store a couple towns over, there was just a little family-run place. My mom would just go in and be like, "You have anything that's kind of like Final Fantasy, one of those games where you just tell it a command and the characters do it?" And then they would just recommend stuff to us. And we ended up with a stack of them, and the bad stack, my mom would come up with different names to call them. Like she'd be like, "That's all the games where your character inexplicably has to dress as a girl to break into a castle for some reason." And you'd be surprised how many games use that mechanic.
Right? I would indeed be surprised.
Off the top of my head, you got Star Tropics, you got Secret of the Stars, and I want to say Inendo Way of the Ninja also did that.
Jesus Christ, this is some deep cuts.
Anyway.
This is getting real deep, some B-sides.
We did have the Brick Game Boy. We used it with the AC adapter 100% of the time. We did not use batteries. But by this point, the Game Boy stayed with my mom. It was like her thing that she could play while she was watching TV. So I didn't get to play much Game Boy until the Super Game Boy came around, which would have been later in 94.
Yeah. Let's talk platform landscape. And I kind of took a different route, kind of the same thing we did with our last episode, because I was barely cognizant in 94. So this is not an era of video games anyway, that I remember.
Wow.
So you went the route of writing very kindly writing meticulous, detailed notes, and I just took screenshots of magazines.
Yeah, that's fair.
So let's talk PC first, because this is not the beginning of, but this is maybe when the DOS era is getting into full swing.
Yeah, this is when it's solidified really as 93, 94, maybe 92. Is when you really see DOS pretty much become the PC standard at that point. Windows was starting to get some traction with Windows 3. Windows 95 was right around the corner, obviously. Mac OS was starting to get a little bit of ground, but it never really caught up. The Amiga was, present. However, Commodore did declare bankruptcy in 94. So that put Amiga in a big question mark. In the US, Amiga was such a small sliver of the market that nobody really paid much attention to it by 94. But this was when everybody was like, oh, we no longer have to pay attention to it because Commodore is gone. And I did look up in Japan, the NEC PC 9800 series was still doing really well, though you did start to see more IBM clones chipping away at that market in Japan.
So I guess what you're saying is they did not keep up with the Commodore.
Yeah, nobody was keeping up with Commodore. Commodore stopped keeping up with us at this point.
Someone in their mid-40s remembers that commercial, and they're like, yes, I remember. I'm trying to figure out where to put it in the episode because it's so dumb, but I want to talk about it.
Yeah. As
I was perusing magazines from, I did January 1994, and then I did January 1995 because that issue would have come out in December of 1994. Yeah.
Unless it was EGM, then it might have come out in November or October.
Right. I like to look at like promotional stuff and contests and things they do. And I found this image that horrified me, and I have to make it the show art. I guess I'm just going to make it the show art. So it's a person, and their head is an issue of this magazine, and apparently they won a contest to be turned into a magazine. And so they built a plaster mold and put this person's real face in it and then painted the front of it to look just like an issue of their magazine.
Yeah.
And it's the scariest, like, Hellraiser shit. Like, he looks like the stupidest Cenobite.
Yeah, this is a video games magazine, by the way.
Yes. So I did read a lot of video games magazine.
Yeah.
And before we get into the home console market, what I really liked looking at is these ultimate gaming rig contests that magazines used to do.
Right.
Because it gives you kind of a general idea of like, hey, what did people actually kick? Because this is one of those eras in gaming where there's so much hardware hitting the market right now in 1994 that it's oversaturated. In these contests really kind of give you an idea of like, hey, what are people actually really gunning for? Like, what are people like, oh yeah, man, if I had unlimited money, I'd buy these consoles. Because, generally these magazines are like, hey, this is the most popular stuff or the stuff people are most excited about right now, if not most popular.
Yeah.
And this is the Ultimate Gaming Rig from January 1994. And it says $18,000 in prizes. It's, first of all, it's, of course, the giant stereo stack of like 30 different units for some reason. Next to a big, it looks like a rear projection television. Oh, yeah. And then what they have hardware-wise is you've got your Super Nintendo and your Genesis. You've got your Super Scope and your Super Nintendo arcade stick.
Advantage.
Yeah, Super Advantage. And then you've got the Sega CD, a couple of Sega arcade sticks, and then a Miniser.
Yeah.
And then nestled in the middle is a Neo Geo, an AES, a home system.
Right.
With game-wise, I can't tell. It looks like... it's hard to say. Maybe. One of those looks like a Fatal Fury.
Might be.
Anyway, so it was interesting to me because obviously Super Nintendo and Genesis were still top dog in 94. They were they were I guess I would call them the primary systems, the ones that like your aunt knew about. Like, oh yeah, the video games, the Super Nintendo and the Genesis.
Yeah.
And then seeing the Neo Geo kind of nestled in there reminds me, because the Neo Geo was not a commercial success in America. The AES and the Neo Geo CD I think that came out in 95. It might have already been out in Japan sometime in 94. I think late 94. But it was very much regarded, I've been told, and Saturn, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, very much noticed and regarded as like, oh my God.
Yeah.
this is real arcade games in your home. No one can fucking afford it because it's crazy expensive. But if I had unlimited money, absolutely I would buy a Neo Geo.
It was the thing you ogled at the Funko Land because it was in their price guide, because they used to give out those newspaper price guides for Funko.
Right.
And when it would list the Neo Geo, it would say Neo Geo System Gold $1,000, Neo Geo System Silver $500, and everybody was like, "If it's a video game that's $1,000, how good does that have to be?"
Right.
And so even if you hadn't played it, you were excited about the idea of it.
And then the cartridges were the same that the arcade machine used, the MVS, so they were also crazy expensive.
And also, I do want to note that when you got this picture, it has to be shortly after they took the Turbo Duo out of that ad, because it was in that ad for a long time.
I didn't know that. Yeah, they must have took that out and swapped it for the Neo Geo come 1994.
It had all four for a while.
Really? Well, let's talk home consoles. Obviously, the NES was still in stores. You could still buy it. I mean, they sold the NES till what? 97?
I think it was in. I think the hardware was probably in stores until 95, maybe 96. The games you could still occasionally find in stores. Accessories at least until 96, 97. Used games you could still find probably up to 2000, 2001.
Into the 2000. I bought my NES at a Funko Land when I was 15.
Yeah.
So that was staunchly in the 2000s.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, Funko Land wasn't around anymore in the 2000s. They were bought.
It would have been a GameStop then.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was. I remember being 15. I specifically, for some reason, I was 15 years old, and I was in a game store, and I bought an NES and a big stack. I paid $60 for like 15, 20 games. You know, Zelda, Ghosts and Goblins, all the Ninja Gaidens, 2 of the Castlevanias. You know, all the Marios.
Well, it was getting cleared out essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, and got all that, and it was great, and I played the crap out of it.
Oh, yeah.
The Super Nintendo and the Genesis, like we talked about, they're kind of the top dogs, at least sales wise, and probably mind share wise in 1994.
Yep.
Turbo Duo was there.
Yeah, it was going away, but it was there. You already saw it shrinking in the stores. They were getting rid of the space they had for it. There were a couple of Duo games still released that year in the U.S. In Japan, obviously, it was still doing fine, but over here, they're clearly phasing it out. If you went to a rental store, you would usually just see NES, Super NES, Genesis, with NES being the biggest section, Super NES and Genesis being kind of equal in size, but a little bit smaller than NES. And sometimes there would be like one little section that was Sega CD and Turbo Duo. And that would be, as much representation as either of those would get.
Yeah, and this is kind of a theme that we see quite a bit in 94 and leading into 95 is this kind of hardware consolidation after this big hardware explosion.
Right.
We're coming in by like 96, we were in like full on consolidation mode.
Oh yeah.
Because Turbo Duo is on its way out.
Yeah.
This is when the Sega CD is still hot and exciting, theoretically.
Yeah.
You know,
it's been out for a few years by this point, and it like people had already started to realize that a lot of the games for it were kind of trash.
Mm-hmm.
But the technology was still exciting, so people were interested in it for the possibilities of what it could do more than the actual games that were available.
I pulled a clipping from January 1995, which would have been in late 1994.
Yeah.
In the headline is it now or never for 3DO? It was an interview with Trip Hawkins talking about the 3DO. And so we've got the 3DO very publicly not doing well. The Turbo is leaving the market. The Sega CD is still there and still getting pushed, but it's losing some steam.
Right.
This really feels like we're coming into this era of everyone's realizing like it feels like in like 92, 93, everyone was like, hey, there's enough space for everyone in the video games market. So everyone showed up to play, right?
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, no, there's not.
Yeah, pretty much. It was
so,
weird because the more expensive consoles, stuff like 3DO and CDI and Laser Active and Neo Geo, you didn't often see them at the same places where you'd get other games, like places like Toys R Us or Walmart or Kmart. you'd see them at either higher end stereo stores or like warehouse clubs like Sam's Club or Costco, or special order at a specialty store like a Funko Land. So there wasn't even really much space for them, for you to even be exposed to them.
Yeah. And what's interesting is I didn't look up the Neo Geo sales numbers. I know that the Neo Geo CD sold poorly in America.
Yeah.
And I suspect that is on the tail of the AES selling poorly in America. So I would even lump the Neo Geo in with all these other systems that are either noticeably struggling or starting to struggle.
Oh, yeah.
In a market that really just wants Super Nintendo and Genesis.
Yeah.
You know? And we haven't even talked about the Saturn, the upcoming Sega Saturn, which I pulled this from this clipping from January 1994. It's them talking about the Saturn 32-bit system, and it has some weird ass like concept image for it. And the magazine is in. Here's another thing I noticed in this era, because 1999 was great for just reading games press and people postulating and discussing the market.
Right.
In 1994, there was a lot less of that.
Yeah.
Most of it reads like half reviews and half just a sales catalog, which is kind of what the games press was in the early 90s.
Oh, yeah.
So it seems pretty positive on the Sega Saturn.
Yeah.
But as we know, the Sega Saturn never did well in America either.
Outside of Japan.
I do notice you noted that rental stores focused heavily on the Super Nintendo and the Genesis, theoretically because that's what had the biggest market share. And if you're running a rental store, you only have so much shelf space.
Oh, yeah.
And when I remember my rental store, they never had anything that was not Genesis or Super Nintendo in this era, ever.
Yeah.
Like, I never even saw it.
Yep.
The most exotic thing I remember seeing at the video store was they had a Super Nintendo Bomberman in the big box because they had the big the multi-tap.
Multi-tap in it,
yeah. And I remember seeing that and being like, what, is the cartridge big too? Like, what is it? Like, I remember having these weird dumb kid thoughts, right?
Yeah, my local rental store only had NES, Super NES, Genesis, but there was a Blockbuster that had opened up in town. I want to say in 94, it might have been in 93, and they carried Turbo and Sega CD. So if we were willing to go to the Blockbuster where they charge extra, then you could see the fancier systems. But
yeah, we didn't get a Blockbuster until almost either right before or right around the year 2000. And I think the next town over, I don't remember them having one. We were relatively starved for rental stores, to be honest.
That's weird.
In a strange way.
Could you rent games at the grocery store?
No, I never. I only heard about that years after the fact. Because people would be like, yeah, you could rent them at the grocery store, like Kroger or Albertsons, and I was like, we didn't have any of those. We had a Diamond.
Yeah, Brookshire's had them in our town. You could go to Brookshire's and rent a Genesis game, and it was weird because for a while there, Brookshire's went all in on Sega. They only had Genesis and no Nintendo anything. You could get a VHS tape or a Genesis game. That was your choices.
Yeah, I never remember seeing any tapes. I suspect that because it was such a small town, and we had a local rental store, they just didn't do it because we had Blazing Video. Why would you go to Diamond when you go to Blazing Video and get your rental there?
Right.
Super Game Boy came out in June of 94, which kind of expanded on the Game Boy in a not small way. I mean, the Super Game Boy was a pretty big deal.
Oh, yeah.
People designed a lot of stuff specifically for it. Like, it was a thing.
Yeah.
And really, at the time, because this is before the Game Boy Pocket, was the best way to play Game Boy games.
Correct.
Because I know people love the brick Game Boy, but man, it looks like shit.
Yeah, I loved the Super Game Boy because now I could suddenly play the games on my TV, and they looked bigger, and I convinced myself the graphics were better.
Yeah.
My mom did not like the Super Game Boy as much because if she had the Super Nintendo, she wanted to play a Super Nintendo game.
Right.
And she didn't want to play some ugly Game Boy game. She could play that on the Game Boy. But
the let's talk handheld market, because this is kind of before the handheld market is weird. Because the Game Gear was out.
Yes, the Lynx was out too.
The Lynx, and as you put, was on life support.
Yeah, it was.
And it was discontinued in 95. Yeah. The Game Gear, I feel, I've not looked up sales numbers, but I don't know that it ever even came close to the Game Boy.
I doubt it. It did well enough that it was frequently on store shelves, at least at toy stores.
Yes.
And if you were in middle or high school at the time, you knew somebody with a Game Gear. You probably knew multiple people with a Game Gear. But it wasn't anywhere near as prominent as the Game Boy.
Yeah. So the handhelds were it feels like not much of a thing.
Yeah, Game Boy was really running away with it, is what was happening.
Yeah, it was like there's Game Boy, and then there's this other crap we guess.
Yeah, because I mean, by that point, you had the Game Gear, which was doing fine. It was respectable sales-wise.
Yeah.
You had the Turbo Express, which technically happened, and you had the Atari Lynx, which started kind of strong, and then just struggled to even make an appearance for 5 years.
Well, Atari was running it, so
right.
What do you expect?
It's weird looking back and remembering that the Lynx came out the same year as the Game Boy.
Yeah, I can't. We talked about it on the Game Boy episodes that we've done, but the Game Boy was ancient when it came out.
Oh yeah.
And I feel like we forget about that because you're like, oh, it's 1990, like what, 89. But no, man, 89. Pardon me, and it's like, no, it was ancient when it came out, and it felt ancient.
Right.
It just had the games. Yeah. As far as arcades, this was full on into the arcade renaissance, the fighting game boom.
Yeah, we're a couple years into it at that point.
Started by Street Fighter II, continued by Mortal Kombat. We have the highest grossing arcade games of the year included Daytona USA, Mortal Kombat 2, Killer Instinct, NBA Jam Tournament Edition, Virtua Fighter, Darkstalkers, Revolution X, Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Cruisin' USA. Pardon me, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Cruisin' USA, and then the Neo Geo MVS because it's a multi-cart system. It's just all of them. Yeah. All of the Neo Geos.
I liked that the highest grossing arcade games list included a console, like an arcade platform. Not like,
well, I mean, I guess, how do you, right. Because, I mean, they just know how much money it takes. Like, they could be swapping cartridges every day. Right. Well, I don't know Revolution X, though. That's the only game on this list that I don't know.
The Aerosmith game? You don't know the Aerosmith game?
No.
Oh my God! Just walking.
I gotta tell you, when I was 6, I wasn't big into Aerosmith.
Just walking past that machine and hearing Steven Tyler yell at you was an experience. You'd be in an arcade trying to push past some dude who's hogging up the Mortal Kombat machine to get over to Street Fighter, and then you just hear Revolution X. And it's not a good game. I'm just going to throw that out. And what's worse...
What? No.
Even worse is the console ports of it. Oh, man, those are bad. I know some people who are huge supporters of the game, and they're wrong. Don't listen to those people. Don't go back and revisit that game. You'll have a bad time.
In Japan, we had the Playdia come out by Bandai. I don't think it ever did great. It had some moderate success. I mean, it got a Hello Kitty game and it got a Dragon Ball game, so it's got to have, there was some attention.
Bandai had the rights for a lot of that stuff for video games in general, so the fact that they could put it on their own console definitely meant it was going to make an appearance.
NEC released the PCFX, which never took off outside of Japan, and I would say was moderately successable in Japan.
When you compare it to the PlayStation and Saturn, I don't know if I would even say moderate. I'd say
it was mildly successful in Japan as a piece of niche hardware.
Maybe, yeah.
SNK released the Neo Geo CD, which we talked about. Sony released the PlayStation at the very end of '94. So there was a lot of excitement. There was a lot of excitement for the PlayStation, but not as much as I anticipated. I think because the market was still so flooded and PlayStation was an unknown.
Yeah, and also because gaming magazines in the early 90s, while they would mention stuff that was happening in Japan, they tried not to focus on it too much because they didn't want to take away sales from what we had, because a lot of the games that we were getting were already several years old sometimes because of how long it would take to localize some of the stuff, that they didn't want to show this brand new shiny thing and then in the next page have a review for something that comparatively looks like garbage. So there was I don't know if it was an actual effort by the press, but it always felt like an effort to kind of downplay what was happening overseas, just so that it wouldn't distract from what they were trying to sell today.
Yeah. I also have a quote that I took from that January 95 magazine. And what's weird is, for people that are younger, when you read a magazine, usually they have quotes from the article you're reading real big on the page to draw your attention to it, to want to read the article. Yeah. And this was one of those big quotes, and I read the whole article looking for where the quote was, because it's beneath a picture of Tom Kalinske, president of Sega of America. Right. And I could not find the quote in the article, so the way it is printed, it is meant to imply that Tom Kalinske said this, but nowhere in the article does it say that he said that. They just put his picture near it. I mean, like right above it. But it says, Saturn will be at a price point that will not make it a mass market item. So in terms of volume and keeping the category exciting, it's Genesis and 32X.
Yeah, that was peak Sega of America fighting Sega of Japan, is what that era is.
And because when did the Saturn come out? It was
95.
It was like late 95, wasn't it? Like August.
It was
September.
It was supposed to be late 95, and it was not. It ended up being early in 95. It was
so we have a lot of.
It was the surprise release at E3 in May. It's available today.
We talked about Sega tanking the Saturn in America on purpose,
right?
But when literally. We're in at a market saturation point where big companies are failing hard in this space. To have the president of Sega of America be like, "Oh, it's not gonna be a mass market item, so buy a 32X." Like, no fucking wonder it fucking failed.
Yeah, the 32X came out in December of 94, and then the Saturn in May of 95. So
could you imagine Sony? Could you imagine Sony coming out and being like, yeah, PS5's not really mass market. It's going to be a little niche. So stick to PS4 if you want to like stay with the exciting video games. But you can get a PS5 if you want it.
You mean it would be like Microsoft saying, well, if you're looking for offline games, we already have a product for that. It's called the Xbox 360. Oh, wait, they did say that.
Yeah, it's just fucking fascinating. Yeah. Like these days, companies get away with shitty quotes like this because there's not a lot of hardware manufacturers.
True.
But I could not imagine in 1994 saying this.
Yeah.
I mean, he might as well have just come out and just burned a big pile of Saturns in a parking lot.
I think what the quote is trying to imply is the Saturn is a premier luxury item. So if you can get one, you're better than all your friends. But if you're a mass market person, then you better stick to the Genesis.
And this is what's interesting is that this sentiment of like, oh, these are luxury gaming items is not that rare in this era in 1994. Like Neo Geo, luxury gaming item. I would say 3DO as well
CDI
was kind of
both presented like that. The laser active,
these are like these are the luxury gaming items.
Right.
And it's like they wanted to treat the video games space the way that people treated televisions, right? Where they're like, all right, you got your 19-inch TV, it's $100, it's whatever, and then you got these big rear projection, big honking TVs, right?
Well, the way the 3DO and CDI were presenting it, it almost felt like they were trying to go for the same angle as the car market, where they were like, well, this is the luxury model, and this is our new 94 model of the luxury model. Where they kept putting out new units because there was a handful of different CDIs from different manufacturers, rather 3DOs from a few different manufacturers. So it was, they definitely tried to present themselves as if they were much fancier than they were.
Yeah. Well, tell me just kind of industry landscape stuff outside of just available software.
Yeah, so your big retailers, you were going to go to Sears or Walmart or Kmart or Toys R Us or CompUSA or Incredible Universe.
Incredible Universe is the name of a store?
Oh man, you're too young to remember Incredible Universe. They were great.
That sounds fantastic. What did they sell? Everything. I want to know.
It was just a lot of here in Dallas Fort Worth anyway. A lot of the former Incredible Universe stores were turned into Fry's. Fry's came in and bought out those stores that Incredible Universe had made.
So it's like Fry's before Fry's.
Basically. And Incredible Universe themed all their stores differently. They all had this custom theme. Like, this is the spaceship-themed Incredible Universe store. And this is, like, the one in Garland was, like, rodeo-themed. And when Fry's moved in, they were like, let's not even tear down those decorations. Just leave them. I don't care. And so Fry's, you had, like, this partially decorated store, and then the rest of it was just empty warehouse store. So it was kind of weird when Fry's first opened around here. But Incredible Universe was similar to like Fry's meets CompUSA, where it was a little less techy, but a lot of stuff.
Right.
So it was
that's cool.
It was
No, I never heard about that.
Oh yeah, and they also, like service merchandise, sold a lot of shit out of catalog, where you'd go in the store and be like, "Oh, that looks really cool. Can I buy it?" Yeah. All right. Where do I get it? Oh, you order it, and then we send it to you in 8 weeks.
Yeah.
So they also carried the luxury consoles.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that was where you would buy stuff, your big department stores, your toy stores, stuff like that. We did have the dedicated game stores, Electronics Boutique, Babbage's Software, etc., Walden Software. They were still primarily focusing on PC stuff in this era. They did have console games, but if you walked into one of their stores, like over half the store would all be PC stuff, and not always games. You'd have your new copy of Falcon or Civilization right next to Norton Antivirus and whatever else was there.
Of course.
So you did still see plenty of mom and pop game stores around the place. Funko had already become a massive nationwide chain as far as used games go. The other dedicated game stores weren't really dabbling in used games much at this point, if at all. You mostly saw it at FuncoLand or the privately owned places. And then, as we mentioned before, the rental stores really controlled so much of the market, with Blockbuster being the massive nationwide one.
Right. Let's talk media then, just kind of broader terms, because we're entering the internet age in 1994.
We're getting there.
We're sort of getting there.
We had AOL keywords. That's about as far as we'd gotten into the internet.
Yeah. As far as magazines, FuncoLand had their magazine, which I don't remember.
It was called Game Informer. It did pretty well. It had been running for 4 years at that point.
I guess I didn't realize they still called it Game Informer back when it was FuncoLand.
Yeah, that was FuncoLand's magazine, the Game Informer, and its editors included Andy, the Game Dandy.
What?
Yeah, that's Andrew McNamara, who went on to become the editor-in-chief for many, many years. If you find the first few issues of Game Informer, he's credited as Andy, the Game Dandy.
All right.
But no, they all had little nicknames in the FuncoLand era, and that was his. But yeah, Funko made Game Informer huge by including it with the FuncoLand Fun Club, which was the 10% discount on used games.
Yeah. And this is also where, I mean, we're full into like video game magazines, lots of them being a thing. You have PC Gamer, Electronic Gaming Monthly, Die Hard Game Fan, Game Players, Video Games and Computer Entertainment, and Game Pro.
Yes.
All on the shelves at the same time. So this was
also EGM2 debuted in 94.
Was it everything that couldn't fit in EGM1?
Yes, it was additional reviews and mostly strategy and cheat codes.
Sega Visions and Nintendo Power were both official magazines on the shelves.
Yep.
Wasn't there a Turbo magazine? Did we get that
Turbo
here?
Play had already ended, and then they had replaced it with Duo World, which had also already ended.
Yeah. Let's talk just general sales stuff. Top best-selling video games in 1994. Number 1 is NBA Jam. Then you have Donkey Kong Country, Mortal Kombat 2, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Street Fighter 2, Madden NFL 95, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I played that on Super Nintendo so much. Lion King, NBA Live 95, and Disney's Aladdin.
Yeah, that kind of tells you that the market was very different then than it is now.
Yes.
Well, not that different. I guess Madden's still on the chart.
True.
But when we look back at the year, with the 2020 vision, the hindsight, looking back, we think about all these incredible games that came out that year. None of them hit that top. Well, some of them hit that top 10 chart. Donkey Kong Country, Sonic 3, and Knuckles.
Yeah.
But you don't see Super Metroid on that list.
Right.
So it's it's weird looking back on it with the prism of time.
Yeah. As far as notable games that came out in the West, specifically in America anyway,
right.
In this time frame, early in the year, you've got Mega Man X, Bonk's Adventure, Sonic 3 in February, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo hit the arcades. In March, you've got XCOM, UFO Defense, Mega Man 6, Star Tropics 2, Super Metroid, Castlevania Bloodlines, Super Mario Land 3, which was the first Wario Land game, Streets of Rage 3, Elder Scrolls Arena, NBA Jam.
First XCOM game also came out.
Yeah, like this, man, this is such a, you're right. Like when you look at like best-selling home video games, like Mega Man X isn't on it. Yeah. You know, Sonic 3 isn't on it. Super Metroid isn't. On there. Well, and Knuckles, which was, that would have been the later.
They lumped in the sales from Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles, and they made them one SKU.
Oh, I just assumed they sold them as like a package deal later on.
No, they did not. That's just the separate sales.
That's cheating.
They did cheat.
You have Donkey Kong 94, TIE Fighter, Darkstalkers, Earthworm Jim, Breath of Fire. I'm just going to skip through some of these. Gunstar Heroes, notable. Doom 2 came out on PC. Final Fantasy 6 on Super NES. Sonic and Knuckles later in the year in October. The 32X came out in November. Donkey Kong Country on the Super Nintendo. We've got Tekken in December.
Warcraft
Tetris
1.
Dr. Mario. Warcraft 1. Heretic and Marathon both came out on PC. Like some crazy good games in this list. They were not the best selling games of the year. Shocking.
I understand Donkey Kong Country being on that list. That makes sense that is one of the best selling games of the year. It is a very well beloved game. But it's just weird how many of those just games that when we look back are like, oh, that's an incredible release, didn't even make the top 10.
Right. Notable events: SSI, the Gold Box D&D games people, were acquired by Mindscape. Silicon and Synapse rebranded as Blizzard Entertainment and would go on to disappoint all of us. Apogee Software created a new division called 3D Realms. You may have heard of them. As far as design trends, Capcom was starting to pull away from Street Fighter 2 with X-Men and Darkstalkers and kind of create that sort of mid-90s Capcom fighting game flavor. 8-bit era was going out the window, but 2D platformers were still a thing. PC gaming innovations came from things like Elder Scrolls Arena, XCOM, and Marathon were very big PC games for this time. And heavy hitters on the two major 16-bit consoles with Donkey Kong Country and Sonic 3 and Knuckles brought in sales before the new console generation would debut the following year. So really a big year for specifically the Super Nintendo and the Genesis, also kind of for PC gaming. Some really big PC stuff. Doom 2 and Heretic, also really big. And Warcraft, which we've already mentioned. System Shock as well. TIE Fighter is still a very beloved game.
First Elder Scrolls game.
Legacy, Saturn put, we continue to number years for at least the following 27 years.
It's true, we did.
Maybe next year we'll stop numbering them, but for now, we continue the trend of numbering.
I can only confirm the following 27 years.
Right. You don't want to be presumptuous. Let's talk final thoughts. I do feel like looking back on this era, it's kind of a flooding of the hardware market that ultimately did result in a major consolidation. But when you look at the games press from the time, it didn't feel that way. It was everyone. It just seemed to be that everyone thought there was enough room for everything. And an era that we look back on is kind of like a high point for the big hitters, you know, the Genesis and the Super Nintendo, and kind of a shit show for everyone else. At the time, didn't feel like the shit show that it ended up being.
At the very least, the media didn't want to advertise it that way.
Right. And so it's interesting to look back on what is basically a market on the verge of I don't want to say collapse, because gaming didn't collapse, but many hardware projects did collapse.
You know, and it's funny you say that, because 10 years prior to this, when the gaming market did collapse because it was flooded with too much garbage, this easily could have set up the same thing, because you did have all of these different pieces of hardware all trying to compete for space in the living room. And if enough parents had gotten roped into buying 3DOs or CDIs instead of Super Nintendos or Genesises or PlayStations, we could have seen another repeat of just bad market flooding.
It felt like the only thing that kept it going was the Genesis and Super Nintendo were just selling so well that it's like, no, it'll all crumble down to that. It'll consolidate down that far, but that bedrock is there,
Right.
But then, we look at it, we say that bedrock is there. You look at games like Super Metroid and Mega Man X and Sonic 3 and Knuckles,
Right.
but they're not even topping the sales charts.
Right.
So it's kind of shocking in retrospect that 94 wasn't kind of the beginning of a larger market collapse
Right.
that we saw. And I'm guessing that the only thing really the PlayStation came out in 95
Right.
and just continued. It was an explosion.
Oh, yeah.
It was massive.
Yeah, I would
And-
actually say that the PlayStation is what killed off all those other consoles.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it came in. I would agree with that. I would say that the PlayStation consolidated the market in a way that the Super Nintendo and the Genesis couldn't, because they were just older.
Right.
These newer consoles were doing things people wanted. They had sales. They were interesting, but the PlayStation came out and did it all better.
Yeah,
than
also
these other newer consoles. It's really fascinating year to look at. I don't know. I think it could have gone very badly. I'm kind of shocked that it didn't go worse than it did. And I'm really interested to see, if we ever go back and we look at 1995 or 1996, like the fact that the game market kept going the way that it did after this is exciting and kind of weird. Just a weird era in general, right? So yeah, that's 1994. That's everything that happened in 1994.
So that's the entire year.
Everything, nothing that didn't happen.
Right.
You may notice we didn't talk about movies, music, geopolitical events, or anything else. That's because none of that happened.
None of that happened. We forgot to mention Bubsy too.
We did. No, I put it on the list.
Oh shit!
Where
my
did
bad.
you? Oh yeah, we did. So yeah, it really just kind of it was a weird year for gaming.
It feels like it was setting up the release of PlayStation and Saturn to a degree, because
for sure.
The heavy hitters on the Super NES and the Genesis were showing what a game with a budget could do, and then we went right into the next generation with PlayStation and Saturn, and PlayStation basically was that premier luxury console, but without the premier price that the 3DO and the CDI had. So it just immediately wrapped up that market and allowed us to have a more focused look in the future.
Right. Well, if you're looking for another premier luxury product, then might I recommend our Patreon at patreon.com/Retro Warriors, where you can get uncut early versions of this show. You can get our spin-off show, Talking Wizards. You can get our business-y show, which is what I'm calling it now, After Hours. It's a good time. We would love to have your support if you would consider supporting us. It would be we would enjoy that a lot. It would make us... Yeah!
Oh, good. Because you sounded a little on the fence about it while you're saying it. So
I decided right then that I would enjoy it.
Excellent.
I put it in the notes, decide if I'll enjoy this or not. We do want to thank the following patrons for their kind patronage, starting with Mark Schwickendie-Offmeyer,
and Chris Courage,
Dilf Toast Esquire,
and Khonshu,
Christopher Britt,
Ridley Scott's mom,
Space Bruce,
Kevin Meyer,
Frankie has done been went to Hollywood,
and STG the Mr. Guy.
Are all the patrons we want to thank this episode. We would love it if you would go rate and review the show on anything. I don't care what. I don't know what you listen to us on. Well, I mean, I know statistically you're listening on iTunes or on an iOS device.
Or an app.
I can see this information, but I don't judge. However you want to rate and review us would be fantastic, and it means a lot to us. And yeah, that's us for this week. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week, and as always, let us cling together.